You know, sometimes I get these ideas, and it's like, hey, you know what would be fun? Measure this statistic, or figure out the top trend in this or that. And then I look at it, and I'm like, yeah. So what I did was I looked at organizations on the whole and said, okay, so who has a goaltender 25 or under right now? That's it. Which organization has a goaltender 25 or under? And I included prospects who should make the team and might make a difference. Because right now we're looking at scoring, defensemen, all these young rookies, and where are the goalies? They're coming. So starting at the top, and remember I'm including NHL goalies age 25 or under. With Gibson in net in Anaheim, and he's 24, he's got probably 6 years in his prime before you have to even worry about it. So Anaheim not having an heir apparent, not a big deal. Arizona, Aiden Hill looked good enough in the early starts he had this year as a 21-year-old goaltender that I could see him being the backup as soon as next year for Arizona. He's better than his numbers might suggest, and I think he will be an NHL goaltender. Boston, the only one I could find is Zane McIntyre. He's 25, and honestly, if he's the future for Boston, they're in trouble. I love Tuukka, I love Hudobin, but there is no guy behind him. There's one that's going to come up later that was in Boston, but he's not now. Buffalo, Luukkonen, who's drafted in the last draft. Buffalo's high on him. They still have Ullmark, who's 24, but I have my doubts that Ullmark's going to be an NHL goaltender. Calgary. So Rittich is currently the backup. He's 25. Gillies is the guy they envision as the future starter when Smith's done. He's 23. And then there's Parsons, who's lingering about. Everybody's excited about at age 20. And these are the ages as of October 1st, I think, is when the annual I was looking everybody up in qualifies their age. So if everybody's gone up a year since then, whoops. But yeah, Parsons is the guy that Calgary is really banking the farm on, although Gillies still has potential to be a starter. In Carolina, and I'm gonna butcher this, Nedeljkovic is 21. He's a good prospect. He's in their organization. Chicago, the only one I could find 25 or under, and I'm including prospects that I think are NHL level, is Anton Forsberg, who's 24. It is too early to label him as a non-NHL goaltender, at least by a year or two. You got to remember, some guys develop later, especially goaltenders. Colorado, Spencer Martin, some decent totals here and there. Maybe he'll end up being a backup for them as early as next year. We'll see. You never know what'll happen. And in Columbus, it's easy to forget Jonas Korpisalo is only 23. Dallas, Jake Ottinger. There's a lot of Dallas fans excited about him. Drafted in this past draft. Detroit has an issue. They have two goalies over 25 in Mrazek and Kuro. Mrazek may not be a starter, and I'm being nice and saying it. And Kuro, I don't know if he's backup capable or if he's just going to be an American Hockey League goaltender who comes up and spells as backup once in a while. The Oilers, Brossoit and Ellis. Two guys who I could see them working as backups. Brossoit, I think, is a better backup than some people give him credit for. But I don't see a future starter for the Oilers, and that could be a problem. Florida, Montembeault, who's 20, is probably their best prospect in net. LA, Cal Peterson at 21, probably their best prospect. Minnesota, who knows? They've got Dubnyk and Stalock. Dubnyk's 31, Stalock's 30. It'll be 2 or 3 years before they really have to worry about it. But Minnesota, in terms of who's next for the Minnesota Wild, I don't know. The one thing I will say, Minnesota, over their 20 years in the NHL, almost 20 years, have made a living at making goaltenders who may have been mediocre elsewhere look really good on their roster. It started with guys like Rolison and McLennan, and it continues to guys like Dubnyk. Montreal, Charlie Lindgren famously filled in pretty well, 23 years of age. Zach Fucale's 22. The bust word gets thrown around with Fucale a lot. He's too young for that, but there has to be some concern in the Montreal organization. The good news is Charlie Lindgren looks pretty good. Nashville, UC Saros is only 22. Jersey, Mackenzie Blackwood at 20 is seen as the start of the future, which is, I think, why Wedgwood was somebody they could move out. The Islanders have the twin Linus Soderstrom and Ilya Sorokin. And one of the two is going to be the starter for the Islanders. So, yeah, the Islanders have a goaltending issue right now. They may have one of these guys may be a dominant starter in the future. And not to be outdone the New York Rangers, knowing the Islanders have that. Well, Shesterkin is there as in 21 years of age. Brandon Halverson, I don't know if he's going to be an NHL goalie, but he's only 21. Adam Huska at 20. I like Huska a lot. I may get roasted for it at some point in my life, but I do. I like Huska's numbers. I like, everything I've seen with Huska tells me he could be one of those steals. Ottawa, they got Hogberg at 20. He's 22 years of age. I don't know if he's NHL level. That's just me, I guess. Philly, Stollers, who got hurt before the season, so we didn't get a chance to see how good he could be. And, of course, famously Carter Hart, who will be starting for the World Junior Championship, which begins on Tuesday. Pittsburgh's got 2, and they're both currently on the roster. Tristan Jarry, who's 22, and Matt Murray, who's 23. Put that into perspective with, like, Fucale's 22, Lindgren's 23. Imagine if Montreal was running with those 2 goalies. What Jarry and Murray are doing in Pittsburgh, even though the Penguins right now reside outside the playoffs, is nothing short of spectacular. That both of them are very young, relatively inexperienced goaltenders, and yes, Matt Murray's got those 2 cup rings, but he's still a very young goaltender. The future's very bright for Pittsburgh in net. St. Louis, they've got Husso, who's about ready. He's 22. Opelka, who's 20, started for Team USA. And Evan Fitzpatrick, who's 19. The Sharks, there's no telling, but the Sharks seem to usually churn out somebody somewhere. The good news for them is Jones is only 27 and Dell's 28. So there's no rush to go out and find somebody for San Jose to be the heir apparent at this point. Tampa, Vasilevsky's only 23. Louis Domingue, who's in the minors, is 25. I don't think Louis Domingue's going to be a great NHL goaltender, but I do think he can develop into a decent backup, and I could see it happening soon. I could see him being the backup by the end of the year. Toronto, I'm not sure who their starter is that's coming in. But, again, Freddie Anderson's a young goaltender. They don't really have to worry about it. They're at least 5 years out from having to worry about it. There's plenty of time to draft somebody and bring him in. Vancouver, who has 2 27-year-old goaltenders in Nilsson and Markstrom, have Demko at 21 and DiPietro at 18. Demko is, I believe, going to be a starter. DiPietro, who knows? But having 2 of them in the organization's nice. This is where it gets embarrassing. Vegas has Subban, who's 23, Ferguson, 19, Dansk, 23, Legace, I should say, 24. All of them have played for the team this year. And outside of Ferguson, they all looked relatively good. Ferguson just didn't play very many minutes. Legace, his numbers are kind of weak, but, he wasn't expected to play at all this year. I think Ferguson is going to take the experience he had at the NHL level, and I think he's going to use it to develop himself into a pretty darn fine NHL goaltender. I think they've got a steal in that 7th-round draft pick from last June. And Subban and Dansk. That could be a good tandem at some point, couldn't it? And Marc-Andre Fleury is not over the hill yet. It's a pretty solid goaltending organization right now. A brand new one, too. St. Louis, you want to talk about embarrassments. Grubauer's at 25. Vanacek is 21. Samsonov. Ilya Samsonov. So the reason I'm wearing capitals, I got capitals. Ilya Samsonov is widely recognized as the best goaltending prospect outside the NHL. Shesterkin, Sorokin are in there as well. I don't think it's a coincidence they're Russians. We'll see which one of the 3 ends up being the best of the 3. But it should be fun as soon as, I would say, this coming October. As soon as next year, I think things are going to get interesting. Washington will be in a position where they're going to have to trade Grubauer if Samsonov's coming in, and if Samsonov's ready. If Samsonov's just going to play in the AHL for a year, that buys them time to figure out what they're going to do with Grubauer or Holtby. This is Washington. Washington churns out goaltenders like crazy. Sort of like what San Jose was doing 15 years ago. The amount of goaltending depth in Washington and the amount of goaltenders they can just keep shedding is insane. I think of Varlamov and Neuwirth as 2 guys just off the top of my head, and there are others. This is an embarrassment of riches for them. And Winnipeg, Hellebuck, who at 24 appears to be ready to be a starter right now. And then there's Comrie, who's 22, and I'm not sure Comrie is going to be an NHL level goaltender. Maybe. Maybe. But it's interesting because this, to me, this is the next wave. These are the guys, and of the names I just gave you, at least 5 of them are going to end up being busts. At least 5 of them are going to be highly thought of that just don't make it. I think of in LA, they've got Jack Campbell in their organization. He's an example. But there are going to be guys that are on this list, or guys I don't have on this list, who are going to be NHL goaltenders. Goaltending is such a crapshoot, especially when you're dealing with guys who are 18, 20, 21, and 22. So yeah, I'm doing this so we can have a discussion on young goaltenders and kind of hype up some of these guys like Sorokin before they come in. But there's no telling. Hannu Toivonen was well thought of. It didn't work out for him. Jim Carey came out of nowhere, became a Vezina goalie, and was gone within a couple of years after that. Goaltending is such a difficult industry, and I think of Tim Thomas, this guy who's buried in the minors for years, and then suddenly he's an NHL goaltender. He's a superstar, and then stuff happened after they won a Stanley Cup, and suddenly he's out of the league. Goaltending is a tough, tough business. So let me know which one of these guys you're most excited to see. And again, if I've missed someone in an organization, many apologies. Let me know who you've got your eye on. This isn't to shun anybody or put anybody down. And yeah, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And I realize it's Christmas Eve, but there's still hockey stuff to talk about. Just because it's Christmas Eve doesn't mean we can't talk hockey. And we're going to keep doing that today and tomorrow. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I'll talk to you again soon. Like and subscribe. I'll see you later.